Debra, Danny, it's really an honor to have you both with us today, this 20th celebration of Martin Luther King birthday at Cedars Sinai. Really, truly appreciate you both being here.
Well, thanks, Zach.
Yeah.
It's an honor for me, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So, Danny, Martin Luther King gave his life to really advocating for those that didn't have a voice, those that were unheard. I know that your work has really followed in that direction, and you've been so involved in the community. Can you tell us how your work has really continued Martin Luther King's foundation and legacy that he's left us?
Well, I'm honored to hear you say that, because certainly we all try to make a statement and make an imprint in what we're doing in the community. I think the best way to talk about my work is, I think my work has culminated in an institution, which is the Brotherhood Crusade. And many people can't say that.
Right.
Dr. King's work, propelled him to become an institution within himself.
Yeah.
And but it was because of taking stances about things that other people were silent on. Dr. King has a statement where he says, you know that your end is near when the society is silent about things that matter. And I'd like to think that I always spoke out about things that mattered, even though they didn't matter to the majority of people, but they mattered to me as a black man and to the community that I represent.
Right. So, like so many organizations, Cedars Sinai, has been and continues to be committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's been challenging, as you know, over the years. But how do we continue to move that dial? How do we make diversity, equity, inclusion a reality?
Well, you got to do things. You got to do something. You got to do something out of the norm. Right. You just got to do something. You got to you advertise. Right. We're pleased that you're starting to advertise. Thanks to Debra Lee and some others. Ms. Cochran. You guys advertising in the black community, and you do great things. You are a piece of work in yourself. They need to tell the black community about you. They need to use the organs that are available in the community to recruit.
Yes.
And that was a very powerful statement. And I could go in so many different ways, including the time I was honored at BET to recognize Dr. Keith Black and let young people know about him and his work. But I want to take you back 50 years.
All right,
to the start, before my time.
I was a little boy.
But yeah, right. To the start of Brotherhood Crusade. What need did you see that you wanted your organization to address?
Well, my good friend Walter Bremont, who was the founder, he had the idea, and it was so in its infant stages that we built it together. But what we saw was that we didn't have an independent institution in our community that could address the health, education, welfare needs, and economic development needs of the black community. If I go to you at BET or Bob at BET, you could say, yes, let's do this. And that's what made BET so powerful. Here in Cedars, if someone goes to you, you have the influence to make things happen. In the community, we didn't have that. So we set out to set up and institutionalize the Brotherhood Crusade before we had anything to sell.
Right.
We were, what they call it, we were affirmational. But we were so passionate about it, and we were so passionate about building a black institution that it manifested itself.
So how have the needs changed over the years? And talk a little bit about your program, Taking Our Community Back.
Well, we're very proud of the Brotherhood and everything we've accomplished, but there's so much more to accomplish. There's so much more. There's still, think of all the mothers who have that memory in their minds, not about George Floyd, but about their
own
sons,
right.
and about things happening in the community. that nobody paid attention to. We know George Floyd's name, thank God. But what about, Willie Smothers? What about Joanne Bonaries?
Right.
These are people who lived a life and had it tragically taken away from them with no fanfare.
Yeah.
No light shined on it. And that's a difficult thing to deal with. Taking our community back was the same kind of notion. We felt, and I certainly felt, that we needed to do something in our own community to deal with some of the issues that were affecting our community. People always talk about the gangs. Well, to some extent, these are our children. Not to some extent, that is the fact.
Right.
These are our grandchildren, these are our nieces, these are our nephews.
Right.
So we needed to get out there and talk to them.
Right.
And that's what we did. We organized black men to come together. They came to the Brotherhood Crusade. For 30 days we did a program. And we went in the projects, we went in the neighborhoods, we knocked on crack dealers' doors and said, come out, we want to talk to you. They didn't come out, but they knew we were serious.
Right.
We wanted a different kind of community. And then people who lived in the community started calling us and said, I think I got one of those next door to me.
Yeah.
And we cut crime in a certain geographical area by 56%.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
That's great.
we couldn't sustain it because that's not our business per se, but our community is our business. But that's the attitude you have to have when you're dealing with things. It's about doing, it's not about talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. We're talking about bravery. Representative John Lewis, said, get into good trouble. And Martin Luther King said, injustice for one is an injustice for all, and we have to stand up for injustices everywhere.
Yes.
Despite the price that we have to pay. And we know that so many have paid dearly for standing up for injustice with livelihood, limb, life. And I know that you've been involved in the trenches fighting for justice. So how do you overcome that fear, right? You can lose your economic livelihood, you can lose your freedom and, pay dearly physically. So how do you mentally prepare yourself for that?
Well, first, I think it takes an internal courage, internal fortitude, and you have to be passionate about what it is you're doing. This is not something you can just sort of write out a script for and then wind up on the streets trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
You have to believe it. You have to believe it in your bones, and you have to be smart. It's not something where you just jump out on the streets and you're just waving a flag or some signs. You've got to know what it is you're trying to accomplish. You've got to have an end game when you start. And you do have to have courage because you do have to stand in front of sometimes police officers. You have to be willing to take their wrath, and you don't know what that wrath is going to be. That wrath could be a bullet. I was at the police commission right in the heat of when Darrell Gates was there, and we were trying to get him out of office. He controlled the army, the whole police force, and he was making sure that he was sending a message to us, we're not going anywhere. I took the American flag, went up, tore it off the podium or whatever they had, and wrapped myself in it. Well, I knew they were going to come and get me. I didn't know what they were going to do to me, but I did it when the cameras were right there, fixed on that meeting and fixed on what the things that I was saying and confronting them with. So I'm saying they didn't shoot me. They did arrest me and
Or you could have been shot.
put me in a back room somewhere for a long time, and I'm just sitting there like, well, where's all my people? And they said, well, they can't get in here. So But my point is, you do have to have a certain passion, and you have to have an idea where this is going. As a result of that, people mobilized outside because they heard and saw on TV what they did to me. And then that created other people wanting to say the same things and demand the same kind of respect and accountability. All we ever wanted was accountability. In all of these cases, with George Floyd, going back to the days when they were battering ram in LA, we just want accountability. We want police officers. I was one of the few that spoke out when they were talking about eradicate the police. I was like, wait, we need the police more than anybody. More of the crime is going on in our community, whether it's by us, to us, or whatever the circumstances are. But we need the police. But we don't need police that are insensitive and indifferent about the our lives. We need people that want to pay attention, they want to be respectful, and they want to be accountable for what they do, because we've had too many lives lost by them just running rampant, roughshod on our community.
Do you see any difference between the protest of the 60s and the type of protests we're seeing today in regard to Black Lives Matter? I hear so many news commentators saying, so great to see different races and a lot of young people, and this is going to make such a big difference. Do you see any difference? Have we made any progress?
Well, certainly we've made progress. There's you who headed a Black network. I mean, there's me who doing pretty well in spite of the fact that I came out of the streets.
Right.
There's Dr. Black at the pinnacle of his profession.
Right.
And, there's Clarence Avant, there's Barry Gordy. I mean, how can you deny what's around us?
Right.
And who's with us?
There's a Black female police commissioner today
in New York.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there've been 2 police chiefs here in LA. So, and there's endless successful Black business people. But for the masses of Black people, I'm not sure a lot has changed. We've got to get into it. You got to get into the meat of this if you're going to change things. And one of the things I would say about Black Lives Matter, they've done a magnificent job of putting some words together, words that we've said a long time, but they took hold. And they got everybody's attention. And I love the diversity in terms of people coming together, but it's back to institutions. When we were on the streets, we were about starting an institution. Everything went into developing that institution. I'm sure for you, when you came here, you had the same ideas that you have today, but there was no institution to carry your message. Now there's an institution to carry your message. Same thing with Bob and yourself with BET. So we have to leave something standing when we come out of the streets.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. I think before, all these organizations that are around today, they didn't exist. But we were hell-bent and determined that they were going to exist because they had a premise that had a very, very specific impact on Black life.
So, Danny, it's 6 decades ago that Martin Luther King said he had a dream for equality for all. 3 generations have passed. You were there on the streets in the 60s. And fast forward, to last year, we're seeing, as Debra alluded to, almost the same images with the same sort of injustice and inequity. So what advice would you give to the audience listening today that we're not sitting here 6 decades from now dealing with these same inequities in healthcare, social injustice, and economic disparity?
I'm telling you guys, it's all about doing it. And for all of this audience here that's listening, do something and hold the people in this hospital accountable. Diversity is not gonna happen just because you'd like it to happen.
Right.
It's gonna happen because you start talking about it. But it's so important that we collaborate together and that you guys are at the helm of making a difference within Cedars, how they see things.
Right.
We know, Danny, one of your legacies, right, in the community is really the brotherhood.
Yes.
Which has had a very tremendous impact. What are you most proud about in terms of what the brotherhood has been able to achieve and do?
Well, first of all, the fact that it's a stabilized institution. I mean, we started from, when I tell you nothing, we started from nothing. Black people, literally made and manufactured the Brotherhood Crusade. I used to go to the garbage yards in the city of Los Angeles and speak to the guys who were going out to collect the garbage. And I'd ask them, because we established a payroll deduction program. We were concerned about our interests. Those guys, and I say we made and manufactured, those guys gave us $1 pay period. That's all it was my mental lapse. I should have asked them for more, but I only asked them for $1 pay period. And they gave it to us. And they gave pretty soon we had $100,000 that was coming in every month.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we had a base.
Right.
As a result of that, that's what I'm most proud of. I'm most proud of the fact that it was made and manufactured by black people, and we continue to advocate for black people, in spite of the fact that we have a lot of diverse programs.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that all of the points, right, that you are making are very, very cogent. I think the message, you know, that we're hearing is that we just have to continue to be engaged, continue to communicate, continue to make sure that our leaders are focused on it, that our leaders are also diverse,
Right.
and address the needs of the community.
Yeah.
And I want to go ahead.
I was going to say, and getting black people on the Cedars board is part of that, because
And I
they'll
wanna
ask the
applaud-
right,
I wanna
they'll
applaud
ask
Cedars
the right questions.
for the diversity and the black people on the board, but it's the people you chose. I mean, Debra Lee is not just, she's a black person, she's a black woman, but she brings so much. And for you to know that and to have reached out for her and for her to engage, Dale Cochran brings so much.
Right.
Okay?
Thank you.
I mean, it's just amazing, you know? I mean,
And they're committed.
and they're committed.
Danny, you know, Martin Luther King really fought for justice for all, right? Not just black individuals, but he stood against the Vietnam War. And injustice for any was injustice for all. So, you know, we live in a very inclusive and diverse world now. And as Martin Luther King, I think, fought for in the 60s, and if he was alive today, he would see the struggles among many, many different groups. Women struggles for equality, all different sort of racial groups. Can you speak to the inclusiveness for injustice?
Well, I think that, you know, it's really on time for Cedars to be following that model, because what you have the charge is to be able to make manifest what his whole life and his whole persona was about, and that is inclusion and progress, which really allows us to make progress for the entire world and the entire society, and to be a model for that.
Right.
So when you have that as an intent, that speaks to, you know, the purity of where you're trying to go. Now you just got to get there, and you've got to look at your reports and all the things that you're doing, and then you've got to micromanage them. You got to say, well, we're doing really good here, but we're not so good over here. But we have a responsibility, and we are charging ourselves with the responsibility of getting our numbers up so we can be the shining light on the hill, so that everybody knows what's possible.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you. You know, it's been a very insightful and I think beneficial discussion for us to hear, and
I agree.
the celebration of the spirit of Dr. King. Thank you, Debra, for
Well, thanks for
being
having
a
me.
part of this, and
Thanks
thank you
both
very
of you
much.
for inviting me.
Yeah.
It was an honor
Yeah.
and a privilege.
Well, we appreciate it.
Well, thank you for all the work you continue to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.